The Valtharian Empire had ruled the stars for 10,000 years, and in all that time, they had never known defeat in battle. They had crushed every species that dared to stand against them, and they had taken whatever worlds they wanted without mercy or hesitation. Their warships numbered in the millions, and their soldiers were trained from birth to be perfect killing machines. But the true secret of their power was something far more terrifying than any army or fleet. They had the Krixthal. The Krixthal were not born. They were created in laboratories deep beneath the frozen surface of the Valtharian homeworld, where the greatest scientists of the Empire spent their entire lives perfecting these ultimate hunters. Each one took 50 years to grow and another 50 years to train. And the result was a predator unlike anything else in the known universe, standing 9 feet tall on 6 powerful limbs. A Krixthal could run faster than any ground vehicle and leap higher than most buildings. Its skin was covered in scales harder than steel, and its claws could tear through battle armor like paper. It had eyes that could see in 17 different spectrums of light, from the deepest infrared to the highest ultraviolet. And its ears could hear a heartbeat from half a mile away. But the most dangerous thing about a Krixthal was its mind. Each hunter possessed an intelligence that rivaled the greatest Valtharian commanders, and their brains contained combat algorithms that could predict the movements of prey with 99% accuracy. They learned from every hunt, adapting and improving with each kill until they became absolutely unstoppable in 300 years of service. No Krixthal had ever failed to eliminate its target. Not once, not ever. High Commander Zelvrix stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the blue and green planet spinning slowly beneath him. This world was called Earth by its primitive inhabitants, and it had been selected for a very special purpose. The humans of Earth had recently developed technology that allowed them to send signals into deep space, and the Valtharian listening posts had intercepted these transmissions. The High Council had decided that humanity needed to learn its place in the galaxy before it became a nuisance. Zelvrix had been given the honor of teaching them this lesson. "Bring Omega Prime to the deployment bay," he commanded, his voice echoing through the massive ship. His officers scrambled to obey, and within minutes, the cargo doors of the lower deck slid open to reveal the most decorated Krixthal in the entire Empire. Omega Prime had completed over 200 successful hunts across 40 different star systems, and its body was covered in scars that told the story of countless battles won. The creature stood motionless as the technicians attached its tracking equipment and ran final diagnostics on its neural implants. Its 4 eyes stared straight ahead, seeing everything and nothing at the same time, waiting patiently for the hunt to begin. "We will deploy you in a small settlement," Zelvrix explained, walking around the massive hunter like a proud parent showing off a child. "You will eliminate several of the native inhabitants, and we will broadcast the footage to their entire planet. They will see what happens to species that draw the attention of the Valtharian Empire, and they will submit without the need for a full invasion." Omega Prime said nothing. It never spoke unless absolutely necessary, and it cared nothing for politics or strategy. It existed for one purpose and one purpose only: to hunt the dropship descended through Earth's atmosphere under full cloaking, invisible to the primitive radar systems that the humans used to watch their skies. Zelvrix had chosen the landing site carefully, selecting a quiet residential area in a region called Ohio that his scouts had identified as completely unremarkable. The houses were small and simple, arranged in neat rows along streets lined with strange vegetation that the humans called trees. There were no military installations nearby, no police stations, nothing that could possibly pose a threat to the greatest hunter in the galaxy. It was perfect. The dropship touched down in a large open area behind one of the houses, and the rear hatch opened with a soft hiss. Omega Prime stepped out onto the grass. its 6 limbs moving with silent grace as it surveyed its new hunting ground. The night air was cool and filled with strange smells that the Krikstal had never encountered before. Its sensors detected small creatures moving in the darkness, rodents and insects that scattered at its approach. Recognizing instinctively that a predator had arrived in their midst, Zelvrix watched through the hunter's visual feed as Omega Prime approached the nearest dwelling. The structure was made of wood and brick, materials so primitive that they barely registered as obstacles. A single blow from the Krikstal's claws would be enough to bring the entire building down, but subtlety was important for this mission. They wanted the humans to see the footage and feel fear, not just witness mindless destruction. Omega Prime circled the house slowly, its sensors scanning for life signs within. It detected 2 large heat signatures on the upper floor, likely the adult inhabitants sleeping in their beds, unaware that death had come to their quiet street. But there was something else. A smaller heat signature on the lower floor caught the hunter's attention. It was warm and alive, sitting motionless on a piece of furniture in the main living area. The Krikstal's combat algorithms classified it as a minor threat at most. Probably one of the juvenile humans that its briefing had mentioned. The hunter selected a window on the side of the house and struck it with precisely calculated force. The glass shattered inward, and Omega Prime flowed through the opening like liquid shadow, landing without a sound on the floor inside. The room was dark to human eyes, but to the Krikstal, it was as bright as day. Every detail was visible in perfect clarity, from the strange furniture to the glowing box in the corner to the small orange creature sitting on the cushioned seat. Omega Prime stopped. The creature was not a juvenile human. It was something else entirely, a small 4-legged animal covered in orange fur with a long tail and pointed ears. It had been sleeping when the hunter entered, but now its eyes were open and focused directly on the Krikstal green eyes that reflected the faint light from outside. Eyes that showed no fear whatsoever. The orange creature yawned slowly, displaying a mouthful of tiny sharp teeth. And then it began to lick its paw as if nothing unusual had happened at all on the dropship. Commander Zelvrix leaned forward in his seat with a confused expression on his face. "What is that thing?" he asked his science officer. The officer consulted his datapad and pulled up information from their scans of Earth's wildlife. "It appears to be a Feliscatus, Commander. The humans keep them as companion animals. They call them cats. A pet?" Zelvrix laughed dismissively. "Omega Prime, ignore the creature and proceed with the mission. Find the humans upstairs and eliminate them." But the Krikstal did not move. Something was wrong. In 300 years of hunting, Omega Prime had faced thousands of different species across hundreds of worlds, and every single one of them had reacted to its presence in the same way. They ran, or they screamed, or they froze in terror as their primitive brains struggled to process the horror before them. This small orange creature did none of those things. It simply sat there, watching the greatest predator in the galaxy with what could only be described as mild annoyance, as if the Krikstal was an uninvited guest who had interrupted its nap. And for the first time in its very long life, Omega Prime felt something it had never experienced before: uncertainty. The orange cat continued to lick its paw with slow, deliberate strokes, completely ignoring the 9-foot killing machine that stood less than 10 feet away. Its name was Mr. Whiskers, though of course the Krikstal had no way of knowing this, and he had lived in this house for 11 years in that time. Mr. Whiskers had established himself as the undisputed ruler of his territory. He had driven away countless squirrels and birds. He had defended his home against the neighbor's dog on multiple occasions, and he had trained his human servants to feed him at exactly the same time every day. He was not impressed by the strange creature that had just broken into his living room. Omega Prime's combat algorithms were struggling to process what was happening. The Kriegstahl had been designed to hunt prey, and prey was supposed to behave in predictable ways. It was supposed to flee or fight or freeze, triggering the hunter's attack protocols and allowing it to do what it did best, but this small orange creature was doing none of those things. And the algorithms had no category for an animal that simply did not care. The hunter took a slow step forward, its claws clicking softly against the wooden floor. This movement should have provoked a response, any response. But Mr. Whiskers merely flicked one ear in the direction of the sound and continued his grooming without looking upon the dropship hovering above the neighborhood. Commander Zelvrix was growing impatient. "What is taking so long?" he demanded, staring at the video feed with increasing frustration. "It is just a small animal, a megaprime. Kill it or ignore it and complete your mission." The Kriegstahl heard the command through its neural implant and prepared to obey. It had never disobeyed an order before, and it was not about to start now. The small creature was clearly not a threat, and there were humans upstairs waiting to be hunted. Omega Prime took another step forward, intending to move past the cat and proceed to the staircase. Mr. Whiskers finally looked up. The cat's eyes locked onto the Kriegstahl with an intensity that made the hunter freeze in place. Those green orbs were not the eyes of prey, the algorithms suddenly realized. They were the eyes of a predator, a creature that had spent millions of years evolving into a perfect killing machine in its own right. The Kriegstahl's sensors began feeding it new data that contradicted everything in its initial assessment. The cat's muscles were coiled beneath its fur, ready to explode into motion at any moment. Its heart rate was slow and steady, the rhythm of a hunter conserving energy before a strike. Its pupils had dilated to capture every photon of available light, tracking the Kriegstahl's movements with surgical precision. This was not prey. This was a competitor. Mr. Whiskers rose from his position on the couch and stretched lazily, extending his claws and dragging them across the fabric in a display that was clearly intentional. The message was unmistakable to any predator watching. "These are my weapons, and I know how to use them." Commander Zelvrix watched the confrontation with growing unease. "Science officer, run a full analysis on that creature. I want to know everything about it." The officer's fingers flew across his console, pulling data from the ship's extensive database on Earth's wildlife. What he found made his blue skin turn several shades paler. "Commander, the Felis caudus is a highly evolved ambush predator. It has been hunting on this planet for millions of years, and its kill rate is approximately 60%, which is higher than any predator we have on record. For comparison, the Kriegstahl's kill rate is 58%. Zelvrix stared at the screen in disbelief. "You are telling me that this tiny creature is statistically more efficient than our ultimate hunter?" "The data does not lie, Commander. These animals are also known for their exceptional reflexes, their ability to see in near total darkness, and their capacity to always land on their feet when falling. They are remarkably well-designed killing machines." Down in the living room, the standoff continued. Mr. Whiskers had jumped down from the couch and was now sitting in the middle of the floor, directly between the Kriegstahl and the staircase. His tail swished slowly back and forth, the only sign that he was paying any attention at all to the massive Intraderomega primes. Processors were running at maximum capacity, trying to calculate the optimal approach. Every scenario it modeled ended with the same conclusion. Engaging this creature would result in an unpredictable outcome. The scenario it modeled ended with the same conclusion. Engaging this creature would result in an unpredictable outcome. The Kriegstahl was not afraid of unpredictable outcomes. It was afraid of failure, and for the first time in 300 years, failure seemed like a genuine possibility. The hunter decided to test its opponent. It lunged forward with one of its 6 limbs, claws extended, aiming for the spot where the cat was sitting, but Mr. Whiskers was no longer there. Cat had moved approximately 2 inches to the left. just enough to avoid the strike, and it had done so with a speed that the Krixthal's visual processors struggled to track. There had been no warning, no tensing of muscles, no shift in weight. The cat had simply been one place, and then it was in Anath Omega Prime struck again, faster this time, using two limbs in a coordinated attack that should have been impossible to dodge. The cat moved again, slipping through the gap between the claws with millimeters to spare. And this time it did not even bother to stand up, just sat there, looking bored. "Impossible," the science officer whispered, watching the footage with wide eyes. "The Krixthal's attack speed exceeds anything on this planet. How is that creature avoiding every strike?" Commander Zelvrix had no answer. He could only watch in horrified fascination as his prized hunter launched attack after attack, each one missing its target by the smallest possible margin. Mr. Whiskers yawned. The cat actually yawned while the deadliest predator in the galaxy tried to kill it. And somehow, that simple gesture was more devastating than any counterattack could have been. It was a statement, a declaration that this battle was so far beneath the cat's abilities that it could not even be bothered to take it seriously. Then Mr. Whiskers did something that broke Omega Prime's mind completely. He attacked back one small orange paw, shot out and booped the Krixthal directly on the snout. There were no claws extended, no intent to cause damage. It was a tap, nothing more, the kind of playful touch that a cat might give to a toy or a confused insect. But to the Krixthal, it was catastrophic. In 300 years, no prey had ever touched Omega Prime. The very idea was unthinkable. The hunter was supposed to be untouchable, invincible, a force of nature that killed without ever being threatened in return. And now a small orange creature had booped it on the nose. The Krixthal recoiled violently, stumbling backward and crashing into a shelf full of human decorations. Glass figurines and picture frames rained down around it as the mighty hunter scrambled to regain its footing, its combat algorithms crashing and rebooting in a desperate attempt to process what had just happened. Mr. Whiskers watched this display with what could only be described as satisfaction. Then he turned around and walked calmly toward the kitchen, his tail held high in the universal feline gesture of absolute dominance. He had made his point, Commander. Zelvrix sat in stunned silence as his ultimate weapon fled from an orange housecat. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible thought began to form. What kind of planet had they chosen to invade? The next 45 minutes would later become required viewing at every Valthrian military academy, not as a training video, but as a warning. Cadets would watch in silence as the greatest hunter their civilization had ever produced was systematically dismantled by a creature that weighed less than 7 kilograms. Mr. Whiskers had moved into the kitchen, and Omega Prime had followed because that was what hunters did. They pursued their prey until the hunt was finished. And the Krixthal refused to accept that this hunt could possibly end in anything other than victory. The kitchen was smaller than the living room, filled with strange human devices and covered surfaces that Mr. Whiskers knew intimately. He had spent 11 years mapping every inch of this territory, learning which cabinets had gaps behind them and which appliances created the best hiding spots. He used all of this knowledge. Now the Krixthal entered the kitchen with its sensors on maximum alert, tracking the cat's heat signature to a position behind a large white box that hummed quietly in the corner. The humans called this device a refrigerator, and Mr. Whiskers had always found the warmth it generated to be quite pleasant. Omega Prime circled around the refrigerator, moving slowly and carefully, determined not to let the cat escape again. Its algorithms had adapted, calculating the creature's probable escape routes and preparing countermoves for each one. The hunter rounded the corner and found nothing. Mr. Whiskers had vanished. Where did it go? Commander Zelvrix shouted at the screen, watching his hunter spin in confused circles. Omega Prime, use your thermal sensors. Find that creature. The crystal was already scanning, but the kitchen was full of heat sources that confused its readings. The humming box radiated warmth. The cooking devices on the counter still held residual heat from the evening meal. And there were pipes running through the walls that carried hot water throughout the house. And then something hit Omega Prime on the head. A small metal cylinder bounced off the hunter's skull and clattered to the floor, followed by another and another. The crystal looked up and saw Mr. Whiskers sitting on top of the refrigerator, casually pushing objects off the edge with his paw. The cat had climbed to the high ground while the hunter was searching below, and now he was using gravity as a weapon. More objects rained down on the crystal. A box of some kind of grain product, a glass container that shattered on impact, a heavy ceramic mug that left a visible dent in the hunter's armored skull. Omega Prime roared in frustration and leaped upward, its powerful limbs propelling it toward the top of the refrigerator with enough force to crack the ceiling. But when the hunter reached the summit, Mr. Whiskers was already gone, having jumped to the counter on the opposite side of the kitchen without making a sound. How is it doing that? The science officer muttered, reviewing the footage frame by frame. The cat is anticipating every move before Omega Prime even makes it. It is like fighting a creature that can see the future. Commander Zelvrix said nothing. He was too busy watching his career dissolve before his eyes. The battle continued, moving from room to room as Omega Prime chased Mr. Whiskers through the house. In the dining room, the cat led the hunter into a maze of chair legs that tangled the crystal's 6 limbs and sent it crashing to the floor. In the hallway, Mr. Whiskers somehow appeared behind the hunter, despite having been in front of it just moments before, delivering another humiliating boot to its hindquarters. And then there was the incident with the cardboard box. Mr. Whiskers had discovered the box weeks ago, when his human servant Susan had ordered something from the internet. She had tried to throw the box away multiple times, but Mr. Whiskers had always rescued it because cardboard boxes were sacred objects that must be protected at all costs. The box sat in the corner of the spare bedroom, and Mr. Whiskers led the crystal directly to it. The hunter followed eagerly, certain that it had finally cornered its prey, and watched as the cat jumped into the box and disappeared. Omega Prime approached cautiously and peered over the edge. The box was empty. The crystal scanned the box with every sensor it possessed, but the results made no sense. The box was clearly too small to hide anything, and yet the cat had entered it and was simply gone. It was as if Mr. Whiskers had stepped into another dimension entirely. Commander, I am detecting an anomaly, the science officer reported, his voice shaking. The cardboard container appears to be some kind of spatial distortion field. My instruments cannot penetrate it. That is impossible, Zelvrix replied, though his voice lacked conviction. It is just a box, as if to prove the impossibility of the situation. Mr. Whiskers suddenly emerged from under the bed on the opposite side of the room, having somehow traveled from the box to the bed without passing through the space between them. The cat sat down and began grooming himself again. Utterly unconcerned with the laws of physics he had just violated, Omega Prime was no longer attempting to attack. The hunter had backed itself into a corner and was making sounds that the Valthrian translation software identified as distress vocalizations. Its eyes darted frantically around the room, searching for threats that might appear from anywhere at any moment. Commander, I am reading dangerous levels of stress hormones in Omega Prime's system, the science officer said quietly. The psychological damage may be permanent. Zelvrix closed his eyes and tried to understand how this had happened. They had brought the deadliest hunter in the galaxy to a primitive backwater planet, and it was being destroyed by a creature that humans kept for amusement. Mr. Whiskers had grown bored with the game. He had proven his dominance thoroughly, and now he wanted to do something more interesting. He walked past the cowering Krixthal, deliberately brushing against one of its trembling limbs, and headed toward the stairs. It was time for a nap. The cat climbed the stairs with the casual confidence of a creature that feared nothing in the universe. And Omega Prime did not follow. The hunter remained frozen in the corner, its combat algorithms locked in an endless loop of analysis and failure, trying desperately to understand an opponent that defied all logic upstairs. Mr. Whiskers pushed open the door to his servant's bedroom and jumped onto the bed. Susan mumbled something in her sleep and rolled over. Completely unaware that an alien invasion had been repelled in her living room, Mr. Whiskers curled up next to her, closed his eyes, and began to purr. The hunt was over. The cat had won, and in the dropship hovering above the quiet Ohio neighborhood, Commander Zelvrix made the only decision he could make under the circumstances: recall Omega Prime. He ordered, his voice hollow and defeated. "We are leaving this planet immediately." "But Commander," one of his officers protested. The mission is over," Zelvrix interrupted. "Send a message to the High Council. Tell them that Earth is not suitable for invasion. Tell them." He paused, searching for words that could possibly explain what had happened. "Tell them we have made a terrible mistake." The emergency session of Valtharian High Council began 3 hours after Commander Zelvrix's transmission reached the homeworld. 12 of the most powerful beings in the Empire gathered in the ancient chamber where every major decision of the past 10,000 years had been made. And they watched the footage from Earth in absolute silence when the recording ended. No one spoke for a very long time. High Council of Reth was the first to break the silence. She was the eldest member of the council, having served for over 300 years, and she had seen many strange things in her long life. But nothing had prepared her for what she had just witnessed. "Play it again," she commanded. And the footage began once more from the beginning. They watched Omega Prime enter the human dwelling with all the confidence of the ultimate predator it was supposed to be. They watched it encounter the small orange creature. They watched the impossible battle that followed. Every humiliating moment captured in perfect detail by the hunter's own recording equipment when the footage reached the part with the cardboard box. Several council members made sounds of distress and had to look away. This must be some kind of deception. Councilor Malthex insisted, his voice tight with denial. "The humans have developed technology to manipulate our recordings. They knew we were coming, and they staged this entire encounter. The recording has been verified 17 times. The chief science advisor replied, her expression grim. "There is no manipulation. What you are seeing is exactly what happened." "Then how do you explain it?" Malthex demanded. "How does a creature that small defeat a Krixthal? How does it move faster than our hunter can track? How does it disappear into a cardboard container and reappear across the room?" The science advisor stepped forward and activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. Dozens of images appeared, showing various Earth animals from the database that Valtharian scouts had compiled over the years. "Counselors, I have spent the past 3 hours conducting emergency research into the planet we attempted to invade. What I have discovered is deeply disturbing." She gestured, and the display zoomed in on the image of a house cat. "This creature, the Felis caudus, is the result of millions of years of evolution on one of the most hostile planets we have ever encountered. Earth is not the peaceful farming world our initial scan suggested. It is what our classification system would designate as a category 9 death world." Murmurs of shock rippled through the chamber. Category 9 was the highest danger rating in the Valtharian system, reserved for planets so lethal that even landing on them was considered suicidal. Consider the evidence. The science advisor continued, changing the display to show statistics and environmental data. Earth's atmosphere contains 21% oxygen, a gas so corrosive that it rusts metal and causes fires to burn. The planet experiences constant tectonic activity, with massive earthquakes and volcanic eruptions occurring regularly. The temperature fluctuates by as much as 100 degrees, depending on location and season. And yet, life thrives there. Council of Vreth observed quietly, precisely. The creatures of Earth have been forced to evolve under the most extreme conditions imaginable, and the result is a biosphere filled with organisms of terrifying efficiency. The house cat, for example, has a hunting success rate of approximately 60%. 60%? Another counselor interrupted. That cannot be correct. Our Kriegsthahl achieve 58% at most. The data has been verified multiple times. The Felis caudus is, statistically speaking, a more effective predator than anything we have ever created. And here is the truly alarming part. The display changed again, showing images of humans interacting with various animals. Cats sleeping on beds, dogs walking beside their owners, horses being ridden across open fields. The humans have formed alliances with these creatures. They have somehow convinced some of the most dangerous predators on their planet to live alongside them, to sleep in their homes, to eat from their hands. The Felis caudus alone has been living with humans for over 10,000 years. Silence fell over the council chamber as the implications sank in. You are saying, High Councilor Vreth said slowly, that the humans took apex predators and turned them into companions. Not just one species, Counselor, dozens. They have formed partnerships with creatures that could easily kill them, and they have done so across their entire planet. Every human settlement contains these allied predators, from the smallest village to the largest city. Counselor Malthex was studying the display with growing horror. What about their larger animals? The four-legged creatures they ride? The science advisor pulled up new images. The horse is a prey animal that humans have bred for speed and endurance. It can run for hours without stopping and kick with enough force to shatter bones. The humans ride them into battle. And these? Another counselor asked, pointing at images of large furry creatures with massive jaws. Tanis lupus familiaris, domesticated wolves. The humans took one of their planet's most effective pack hunters and bred them into hundreds of different varieties. Some are used for tracking, some for guarding, some for combat. The larger breeds can weigh over 90 kilograms and bite through bone. She pulled up one final image. A photograph of a human child hugging an enormous dog that could clearly have killed it with a single snap of its jaws. And they keep them as pets for their young. The council stared at the image in horrified fascination. This is madness, Councilor Malthex whispered. No sane species would surround itself with predators. Unless, High Councilor Vreth said thoughtfully, the humans are not prey at all. Unless they are predators themselves, and they recognize kinship with these creatures. The science advisor nodded slowly. Our analysis supports this hypothesis. Humans are persistence hunters, evolved to chase prey across vast distances until it collapses from exhaustion. They have no natural weapons, no claws or fangs, but they have developed intelligence and tool use to compensate. They are, in their own way, as dangerous as anything else on their planet, and they have allied themselves with predators, Vreth continued. They have built a coalition of killers, each species contributing its own strengths to the collective. The cats provide stealth and precision. The dogs provide tracking and pack tactics. The horses provide mobility. Commander Zelvrik sent a follow-up report. The science advisor added grimly. Before leaving Earth's orbit, he observed a human walking one of the large canines through the same settlement where Omega Prime was deployed. The creature was attached to a simple rope, following the human with perfect obedience. She paused to let that sink in. If that is what the humans keep as weapons, what else might they have that we have not yet discovered? High Councilor Vreth rose from her seat and walked slowly to the center of the chamber, her eyes fixed on the holographic display. She studied the images of humans and their animal companions for a long moment, then turned to address her fellow counselors. "We have made an error in judgment," she announced. "Earth is not a target for conquest. It is a warning. These humans have demonstrated something that we in our arrogance never considered possible." "And what is that?" Counselor Malthex Askadvreth's expression was grave. "They have shown us that there is more than one way to rule a world. We use force and fear and engineered monsters. They use alliance and cooperation and mutual respect. And based on what we have seen tonight, I am no longer certain which approach is superior." She returned to her seat and folded her hands in front of her. "I move that we classify Earth as a restricted zone, forbidden to all Valtharian vessels. We will not invade this planet. We will not threaten these humans. We will leave them alone and hope that they never learn we were watching." The vote was unanimous. The Valtharian withdrawal from Earth sector was completed within 3 standard days, and every ship, every probe, every listening post was removed with an urgency that surprised even the officers carrying out the orders. The official reason given in military records was that the planet had been deemed unsuitable for colonization due to environmental hazards. No one believed. That explanation rumors began to spread almost immediately. Whispered conversations in the corridors of warships and the back rooms of trading posts. Something had happened at Earth, something so terrible that the mighty Valtharian Empire had turned and fled without firing a single shot. The truth. When it finally leaked, spread across the galaxy like wildfire, a smuggler named Keth was the first to obtain a copy of the footage. He had bribed a low-ranking Valtharian officer who needed money for gambling debts. And what he received in exchange was worth more than any cargo he had ever transported. Within a week, every species in the known galaxy had seen the recording of Omega Prime versus Mr. Whiskers. The reactions varied enormously. Some species laughed at the humiliation of their old enemies, delighted to see the Valthorians brought low by such an unlikely opponent. Others watched in thoughtful silence, recognizing that if a small household pet could defeat a Krixthal, then perhaps they had underestimated the humans as well. The Grothri Collective, a peaceful federation of herbivore species, immediately dispatched a diplomatic mission to Earth's solar system. They had been searching for allies against Valtharian aggression for centuries, and any species that kept such formidable predators as companions was clearly worth cultivating. They turned back at the edge of the system when their long-range sensors detected approximately 4 billion heat signatures that matched the profile of Feliscotta's 4 billion tiny apex predators. And the humans kept them in their homes. The Grothri ambassador sent a message of friendship from a safe distance, and hoped that would be sufficient. Commander Zelvrix was quietly reassigned to a remote monitoring station on the far side of the Empire, where he spent his remaining years staring at empty space and trying not to think about what had happened in Ohio. His career was effectively over. Though no formal charges were ever filed, Omega Prime was a different matter entirely. The Krixthal had been recovered from the mission in a state of severe psychological trauma, and despite the best efforts of Valtharian scientists, it never fully recovered. The hunter that had once been the pride of the Empire now flinched at sudden movements and refused to enter any room until it had been thoroughly scanned for cardboard boxes. The scientists tried everything. They wiped its memory banks. They reset its combat algorithms. They even attempted to retrain it from scratch using simulated hunts. Nothing worked. Somewhere deep in Omega Prime's neural architecture, the encounter with Mr. Whiskers had left scars that could not be erased. Eventually, the hunter was retired to a research facility where it spent its days in a specially designed enclosure, pacing back and forth and occasionally making distress sounds at shadows that reminded it of small orange creatures. The other Krixthal were informed of what had happened to their brother, And for the first time in the history of the program, several of them refused deployment orders. They cited operational concerns and requested additional training, but everyone knew the real reason. They were afraid back on Earth. None of this was known. The humans continued their lives in blissful ignorance, unaware that they had been targeted for invasion or that their household pets had saved them from enslavement. Susan Mitchell of Dayton, Ohio woke up the morning after the incident and noticed that her living room window had been shattered. She assumed it was teenagers and called her insurance company. The broken glass was cleaned up. A repair technician came to install a new window, and life in the quiet suburban neighborhood returned to normal. Susan did notice that Mr. Whiskers seemed particularly pleased with himself that week, but she attributed it to the extra treats she had been giving him. "You have been such a good boy lately," she told him, scratching behind his ears as he purred contentedly. "No knocking things off shelves, no attacking my feet in the middle of the night. I do not know what has gotten into you." Mr. Whiskers accepted the praise as his due. He had always known that he was a good boy, the best boy, and it was gratifying that his human servant was finally recognizing this fact. He did not think about the strange creature that had invaded his territory. It was gone now, driven away by his superior hunting skills, and that was all that mattered. There would always be intruders who did not understand the natural order of things, and Mr. Whiskers would always be there to educate them. That was simply what cats did years past. And the legend of Earth continued to grow throughout the galaxy. Traders who had never been within 1,000 light years of the planet told stories about the terrifying predators that humans kept as pets. Diplomats warned their governments to avoid any action that might draw human attention. Military planners quietly removed Earth from lists of potential targets. The phrase "Remember Ohio" became a common expression among Valtharian soldiers, used as a cautionary reminder against overconfidence. Young warriors who had never seen the footage knew the story anyway, passed down through generations as a warning about the dangers of underestimating an enemy. A few brave or foolish souls attempted to verify the stories by sending probes to Earth, hoping to gather intelligence that might reveal weaknesses in the human-animal alliance. Every single one of these probes was either destroyed by Earth's space agencies or, in one memorable case, attacked by a seagull shortly after entering the atmosphere. The Galactic Council eventually convened a special session to discuss the Earth situation. And after 3 days of heated debate, they reached a decision that would shape interstellar policy for millennia to come. Humanity was officially classified as a Class 7 anomaly, a designation reserved for species that defied conventional understanding and should be avoided at all costs. Documentation included a detailed warning about the various predator species that humans had allied with, along with extensive footage of cats doing inexplicable things like fitting into containers too small for their bodies, appearing in locations they could not possibly have reached, and staring at empty corners as if perceiving threats invisible to all other beings. No one could explain these abilities, and no one particularly wanted to try. As for Mr. Whiskers, he lived out the rest of his days in comfort and contentment, unaware of his role in preventing the conquest of his planet. He continued to knock things off shelves when he felt his servants were not paying enough attention to him. He continued to attack feet that moved under blankets. And he continued to demand food at exactly the same time every day. Susan never did figure out why he sometimes sat at the living room window at night, staring up at the stars with an expression that seemed almost knowing. "Silly cat," she would say, scooping him up and carrying him to bed. "There is nothing out there. Come on, it is time to sleep." And Mr. Whiskers would purr and allow himself to be carried, because his human servant was right in a way she did not understand. There was nothing out there. Not anymore. He had made sure of that high above the earth, where the stars burned cold and bright in the infinite darkness of space. The galaxy continued to spin in its ancient dance. Empires rose and fell, wars were fought and forgotten, and countless species lived and died without ever knowing that their fates had been shaped by a single night in a quiet Ohio neighborhood. And in that neighborhood, in a small house on a tree-lined street, an orange tabby cat slept peacefully on his human's bed. Dreaming whatever dreams cats dream, he was Mr. Whiskers, defender of Earth, terror of the Valthrian Empire, an undisputed champion of the living room, and he was a very, very good boy.